Welcome to Commander Central, or as someone called us on Twitter the other day, the Cheesehead Commander Show, which I thought was pretty good. Someone referred to us as it was like discussion of like, you know, what EDH content creators you make, and someone actually back to back referred to us in CCO as like the Canucks and the Cheesehead Commander Show, and then someone followed up with, "You mean CCO podcast and Commander Central?" Yeah, that's what I meant.
I'm gonna wear my Cheesehead next week. I am totally gonna do it.
Could wear it to that PPTQ you're going to this weekend,
right?
So the Canucks and the Cheesehead Commander Show. That is us. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
And all cheeseheads.
Woo!
How you guys doing today?
It's not 8 o'clock in the morning.
It is not. We're a little more energetic than we were last week's show. It took us a little while to get warmed up.
Right. We did that.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So here, I will tell you my day. I've not even hinted at this to you guys yet, but here's how my day has went so far. So I came into work early this morning because it was my wife's first day back at school. So she was up early. So then I was up early, and I'm like, I'm just going to go in. So I got there about 7:30, parked in the parking lot, was walking, waiting to cross the street, and a car slowed down so I could cross, and then got just popped from behind.
Oh, no!
Just got rear. So the first car pulls kind of around, and the second car just stayed there. And I'm like looking, and every airbag went off. It was like a little Toyota. Her, like the front airbags, the side, like you couldn't see her in the car. So first I walked over to the other car, and the lady she's like, "No, I'm fine. I'll call the police." And I walked over to the first car, and like knocked on the window. And like at that point, the front airbag had deflated enough I could see her, and she's like just crying, and she just waves me off. No, not interested in talking or doing anything. And she sat there in the car crying for like 15 minutes, like not coming out. She seemed fine. I kept like going back over and knocking, and she just kept waving me off. She was just trying to get it together. But then I had to wait 20 minutes for the police because I was the witness. So I'm like, the police took like another half hour to show up, and then I had to like give my information. So of course my plan to go into work early means I showed up about 8. I was about a half hour late, even though I'm like, a block and a half from my office where this happened. So then at lunchtime, because it's my wife's first day back at school, I always go get her flowers on her first day. So I walked around the farmer's market, bought a bundle of flowers, walked back to my car, drove out to her office, dropped the flowers off, came back. And when I came back, the parking lot was filled up because there's construction downtown, and one of the parking ramps is inaccessible. Like one whole street is inaccessible, so everyone's parking in the same lot. So there was literally 0 spaces. So I had to drive around, and I wound up finding a spot on the street like 6 blocks from my office down by the river in the opposite direction. And I had to park there because I had nowhere else to park. So that's fine. It wasn't a big deal. So I walked back to the office. End of the day comes 5 o'clock. So I go to leave to come here and walk to the parking lot, which is the opposite direction, and got there. And I'm like, where's my I'm like, oh, and then I remembered and had to turn around and scoot back, which is, took me like 4 blocks back to the office and then another 6 the other direction to get back down to where my car was. So that's why I showed up about a half hour late, because I was walking all over the place. So yeah, that was my 2 parking lot stories today. So everything after those 2 things is bound to go better.
I would imagine so.
I would hope so.
I mean, it could have been worse. Like, I guess I didn't get hit as just being the observer was fine, but it just was time consuming. So
that lady had to be cooking if she set off every airbag in that car.
She really wasn't going that fast either. That was what kind of surprised me. She didn't hit her that hard because the other vehicle was kind of a minivan looking thing, and it had no damage in the back of it. And even the girl whose airbags went off, she had like a smashed headlight, but like her hood looked fine. I couldn't see any like, because usually when you hit like that,
unless
the
they
hood
hit the
crumples
sensor
up.
Perfect.
Maybe. Because usually your hood just gets crumpled on that kind of an impact, and hers didn't. It looked like it was fine.
Maybe she never got it taken in for the recall on the airbags for Toyota.
Maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
It just happened to go off while she got hit.
Right, yeah. Maybe she's been driving those airbags deployed for how long?
I can nap and drive at the same
Right,
time.
right. That's why she hit the car. Any fun game anyone played this week? Chris played D&D, so you had fun.
Yeah, I did.
Max, how about you?
We played quite a few.
Yeah, we had a busy night.
Over the weekend,
That's true, yeah.
My decks crapped all over me, so that was fun.
You got land screwed in every game, I think.
Yep.
I don't know if Chris heard this story. So I played the Enchantress Precon stock, untouched. I had opened it up, shuffled up, and played it.
He didn't even put sleeves on it.
Not even in sleeves.
Blasphemy.
Right. And Max was playing Brago, which is his strong deck. And once again got land screwed.
Yep.
So he had nothing going on. And when I was playing, the third deck was only 3 of us, was a Windgrace deck that was mostly stock. And I had fallen behind, but I had Estrid out, and I was ticking her up. And the guy playing Windgrace had a chance to hit Estrid, but he didn't. And
He took care of my Venser.
He killed your Venser instead. And again, like, your deck is much better. Like, I kind of understand it. It wasn't a bad call.
I think he didn't realize Estrid was ready to ult. I think that was the problem.
That could have been it.
Because I wasn't even aware until you're like, okay, I'm going to ult Estrid.
And I had one creature in play, which is Whitewater Naiads, which is an enchantment creature that has Constellation. And when an enchantment comes into play, target creature can't block this turn.
Yep.
So that was my only creature. So I got back to me. I ulted Estrid, which mills 7 into your library. Then you bring all those enchantments back into play. One of the enchantments that came back into play was Nylea's Colossus, which is the one that when it comes into play or you cast an enchantment, double the power of
Target
creature you control. And Estrid's Invocation came into play with it, which I made a copy of Nylea's Colossus.
Oh, jeez.
And then Max got his calculator, started doing the math, because then every enchantment that comes into play doubles and doubles. And like between the enchantments and the auras, I can't remember what the number was, enough came into play to put the Whitewater Naiads over 1 million damage. It was over 1 million with a stock precon. And then because of all the Whitewater Naiads triggers, nothing could block.
Swords to Plowshares.
And then there was a
He
fight.
was
tapped out.
But one of the other card that came into play off the Estrid, Finest Hour.
Oh, no.
So I got a second attack phase. It was like literally the dream scenario with that deck.
Yeah, it was great.
So it was cool to say. Max didn't mind that loss.
No, not at all.
After seeing how stupid that was.
Jeez, I thought we didn't play CEDH over here.
Right. Yeah.
Unsleeved CEDH.
The unsleeved stock precon CEDH. And it wasn't like, it was a fairly, like, we had gone, it was probably 12 turns or something by the time that happened. And you were still at no blue mana, maybe? No, you also played because you played Venser.
I had 1 blue
but
mana.
you just got like 1 blue mana because you went like 7 or 8 turns where you didn't have colored mana.
It was terrible.
I learned to mulligan that.
My starting hand was plain, Soul Ring, Grim Monolith. Like, it was the nut hand without a blue mana.
Nope.
And you're like, I'm bound to draw blue mana. Well, had it been at least a blue mana and not a white one, you're like, I'll draw a draw spell too, and I can maybe get there. Yeah, white mana being the one you had was the worst. That's really the only super crazy game. We just played some good games, but nothing like too over the top or worth going into. C18 Commander, we started seeing a few come through.
That's an understatement.
I've seen a lot of them.
Windgrace, I've seen 3 different people in the shop with Windgrace decks. And I like Windgrace. I've been impressed every time. Even the stock deck that we played on Sunday was fine.
Yeah.
Considering it was mostly stock. And the ones that have been actually tweaked play really, really well.
Yeah. We saw, a couple of Arena decks?
A couple of Arena decks. Arena played really well, too. And we saw a friend of ours just finished Peer and Toothy, which I remember us liking on the Battle Bond show, but we never saw a deck. He just built a Peer and Toothy +1 counters deck that really kicked off.
He did not do that against me when he played it.
Did he fall apart against you?
Yeah.
Because I played it twice in both games. It kicked off fast.
I also saw a couple Brutaclad decks.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Around the shop. So
people are getting their C18 on, and and they've all been really. I've enjoyed playing all the decks and seeing them. So I have no complaints.
Yeah.
Any MVP cards this week that we saw?
I have one, and it was actually one an opponent played against me. So I was playing my Brago deck against a Saskia deck and a Brutaclad deck, and the opponent played a Blind Obedience on like turn 5. And I played a little bit of a slower roll with Brago. I think I Enlightened Tutored on turn 1 for Soul Ring because I only had 2 lands in my hand. So I Enlightened Tutored for Soul Ring, got Brago out on turn 3. I think the next turn he played Blind Obedience, and it officially shut my entire hand down because I had Grim Monolith and Sad Robot, and like, okay, all these are going to come into tap. And Grim Monolith now essentially costs 6 to play because it's going to cost me 2.
And then you have to pay 4 to untap it.
I have to pay 4 to untap it just to use it.
Right.
So I was lucky enough to top deck an Archaeomancer, play it, and bring back Enlightened Tutor. And I had a mana open, and I Enlightened Tutored for Active Authority.
So you could kill.
Nice.
So I could kill Blind Obedience.
But still, that's a lot of work just to deal with that one card. That
it slowed Brago down by about 4 turns.
Yeah, even having the answer, the damage was already done at that point. I think you wanted winning the game at the end, didn't you?
Yeah, they both scooped.
But I mean, like, that still bought them a ton of time.
Yeah.
For 2 mana, for a 2-mana enchantment.
I got to steal that new mana rock that draws you 3 cards and taps for 3 mana.
Okay.
And then it was weird because the opponent, I was tapped out. He could swing in with his Kite Sail or Journeyman's Kite and get it back. And I asked him, like, why didn't you do that? I said, you might have drawn an answer to my stuff. You could have drawn a board wipe. He goes, and he gave the response of, well, if the cards in my hand aren't good enough, you know, the next 3 probably weren't going to be answers either. I said, well, you're never going to know unless you draw the cards. I said, you didn't know that. You could have drawn anything that would have killed Brago because he didn't have X-proof.
It also takes the advantage away from you.
Right, yeah. And there's no harm in checking, in like, trying to get the win.
I mean, that mana rock is actually what I use to just play Active Authority, and because I'm like, oh, triple white, go.
Right. I saw a couple things in games I'll mention briefly as well, because we talked about a couple weeks back on a show about board state protection, so like heroic intervention kind of cards or Teferi's protection. And I saw Max lose a game to a Boros Charm.
Yep.
That somebody fired off in response to a board wipe. He had Sunforger out, but he Sunforgered into Boros Charm after board wiping himself, so everyone lost their board state and he saved his. And then I won a game with a Ghostway in my Sphinx deck when someone board wiped, and I just Ghostwayed. But I also had the Sphinx that lets you factor fiction when a Sphinx comes into play. So on top of that, I just drew like 12 cards or something, in addition to everyone else being board wiped and me having, you know, 5 Sphinxes afterwards. So just that further reinforced that thing, like, man, I really want 1 or 2 cards in all my decks that can save me. And having Ghostway, being able to blink stuff too, is really useful if you want to use it for that effect. Boros Charm, like we said in that show, can do so many different things too. So that just definitely reinforced that conversation we had. So, social media, gentlemen. Where can they reach us if you want to tell us a cool story about something that happened, or ask us a question, or tell us about anything interesting happening in your world of Magic?
We're on MySpace. I think that was the name of that website.
You can find us on Geocities at...
No, so you can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Facebook search us, not MySpace. I don't even know if MySpace is still around.
I think AOL owns it, and I think Yahoo.
Did we have this AOL conversation once recently?
Yeah. So Facebook search us CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube, where we post actually a lot of our content. You can search us up at CMDR Central there, or you can find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
We are also on Patreon by searching CMDR Central. And this month, again, if you are a patron by the end of the month, August 31st, you'll be entered to win the C18 deck.
We don't know which one yet, I think, still.
Which one yet?
We had this conversation today. Actually, here's a conversation Max and I had. Max is like, what C18 deck should we give away, do you know? And I was like, I don't have a preference. Do you care? He's like, no. Let's have Chris decide.
Chris, you get to pick.
This is going to be my pick.
Yes.
I think we should put a poll up to our listeners, and everyone
all
votes.
right.
Okay.
There we go.
I will put a poll on Patreon tonight.
All right.
You will also be entered to win the brand new Commander Central playmat.
Yes, indeed.
Which we will be ordering shortly once we rework the logo a little.
Yep. So the problem we had was it was going to wind up on a white playmat as it's laid out right now. That will just get dirty.
It looks sharp for the first week.
Right, yeah.
I got outvoted. And for all of our followers out there on the Twitter birds, if you retweet any of our tweets where we use hashtag CMDRBday, you'll be entered to win that copy of the Duelist magazine with the sealed giant Shivan Dragon.
Yep.
And the World Championship Force Will still in the packaging.
In great shape. They're like minty, still sealed in the plastic.
When you said Shivan Dragon, I was sitting here so confused. I'm like, I thought there was a Force of Will in there.
There's also this like an oversized Shivan Dragon.
Nice.
So
yep.
I need the oversized Sarah Angel really bad for my collection. If you guys ever see one, let me know.
Well, I mean, if we see one, we'll use it for a contest, and you would have a chance to win if you'd like to enter.
I'll get a different card for our contest winners, and we'll go from there.
And if you would like to pick up an Enchantress deck, or a Boros Charm, or a Teferi's Protection, or a Ghostway for your Commander deck, where would be a good place you could do that on the internet, Max?
Flipsidegaming.com, and make sure you use promo code CMDR when you check out, and you'll get 10% off your entire order. And we get a little help on that too. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, what's the show today, guys? What are we doing?
We're doing a Decks You Play for one of our Patreon listeners.
And we've been talking about Lord Windgrace, who we liked, and we didn't necessarily love the deck. We liked Lord Windgrace, and we just mentioned earlier that we've seen him play a few times and like it. However, we're doing a Jund Landfall deck that is not a Lord Windgrace deck. It is instead Veavictis Asmadi, the new one from
Dominaria?
No, it's from what's the core set? C18.
Is it M19?
M19.
M19. There we
It
go.
is M19.
Which I thought was kind of interesting. Because we did recently have a Veavictis deck come through the store that's much more like top deck manipulation, polymorph kind of stuff. But this is a Jund Landfall deck.
It is. This deck was brought to us by William, one of our Patreon supporters.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the support.
Yes.
So let's take a look at this deck here. I'll do a real brief overview. It's Jund, as we mentioned. 3.88 average converted mana cost. So my initial comments here I would make, just looking at it briefly, and we'll touch on some of the stuff in a little more detail, is it's a little lighter on draw than I would probably run in a deck. Because if you get board wiped in, it's tough to kind of rebuild unless you've got a fistful of answers.
Yep.
And I think you need to lean into a build path a little bit more. It's a landfall deck, but Veavictis doesn't really play. Like you can do split theme decks. My Glypha deck is kind of split themed. It's got Death Touch and artifacts. But I think you have to really focus on then those two build paths. Because in this case, Veavictis doesn't do really anything with landfall for the most part.
I wonder if that's the whole point.
Yeah, I feel like this was probably built before we got Lord Windgrace. Because really, you could easily swap out Veavictis for Lord Windgrace, and the deck, there's not a bunch of other cards that you're like, why is this in here?
Yep.
Why is this in my Lord Windgrace deck? Because it would make sense in that deck as well. On the other hand, I like that it's something different, too.
Right. Little history here. William provided us two decks. It was this one, or a Tatiova landfall deck as well. And we kind of all leaned into this one because Veavictis is new, it's interesting, and you can go a bunch of different ways with Veavictis, where Tatiova is a clear, straight shot highway to wherever you want to go.
So just for a rough overhead, first impression, what is your first impression of this deck?
Veavictis.
That's the
caught
first thing
me.
that catches your eye?
Caught me off guard, looking at that and then going through the deck list and seeing that really the deck doesn't play around him at all.
It does not.
It's he's almost like a surprise type of deal.
But you have to deal with him.
Yes.
Or you're going to lose your best permanent, and odds are pretty low. I mean, you could get something great back, but it's like Chaos Warp. For every one story where somebody kills you or whatever, and then they flip an Elvish Norn, there's those 10 times where you just get nothing off of it.
Yep.
Or you get a bland and who cares, or you get a worse creature and who cares.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what it is for the landfall. Off
Maybe,
of his ability,
yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
My first impressions when I looked at the deck, it's super tight, whether it's Veavictis at the helm or Lord Windgrace if he chooses to swap them in and out. The deck, the 99 is super tight as is, so it was really cool to look at it and see what minor improvements we can make to make it even better.
And one thing I'd like us to do here as we're going through is I'd like to have each person find one kind of deep dive card. It's easier to say hey, Swords to Plowshares is better than Terror, and you should run that. But it's nice to find something a little bit more obscure too. So I think we'll each try to challenge ourselves to find one.
Mine's not obscure,
Yours
but
okay.
It's definitely a card I don't see played too much.
All right, well that's good. That's good enough.
Anymore, anyways.
So I think we should just start off with the land base. So he is running 43 total, which is a good number for a landfall deck.
It makes sense in this environment where you're trying to put a lot of lands into play.
Right. Some notes that we all kind of agree on. Wasteland, it's a good card, but it probably should be Ghost Quarter because you can Ghost Quarter your own stuff to get that extra landfall trigger.
Yep, I saw Field of Ruin in there, which does pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Field of Ruin makes complete sense we've discussed that being a better card than maybe people thought at first, myself included. But Ghost Quarter kind of right. It simulates the same thing where you can use it to hit a land, but if you need to get that extra landfall trigger, and there's been plenty of times with a landfall deck myself, I've done that. Like I've Ghost Quartered a land just to get another landfall out of it.
I saw it a lot this week at the shop.
Yeah.
Another one that would probably fit well into this deck would be Ghost Town.
And that was kind of my deep dive card on the list.
There we go. There's our first one.
For those who don't know, Ghost Town is an old land. It taps for colorless, but you can spend a 0 and return Ghost Town to its owner's hand. You can activate this ability only if it's not your turn. So what you use Ghost Town for is basically plenty of times with these kind of decks, with the landfall deck, you have the ability to do 2 or 3 lands per turn just based on having Azusa or something in play, exploration, burgeoning, whatever. It's one thing to have those triggers, another thing to be able to take advantage of them, because you need to have that many lands in your hand to do that. Ghost Town lets you always guarantee you can get that landfall trigger if you want it on the turn before the person's done passing to you. Just bounce your Ghost Quarter, and if you happen to not draw land, then you've got that trigger. Or even if you do, you have that second trigger, that third trigger if you can get it. So I'm a really big fan of Ghost Town. It's like $2, I think, last time I checked. It has not been reprinted, but it is not on the reserve list either. I was kind of hoping it would be in that Jund Windgrace deck because it would be nice to get one in a Modern Border, but you have to dig through someone's box or order one on Flipside Gaming to get one because it's a relatively old card at this point.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder about those old cards if they don't really dig deep when they're building a new set.
I mean, maybe not. Well, and for the average player too, like if you're the average person who doesn't listen to podcasts or something, how would you even know that card exists? It's not going to be in the case at your shop. It's probably not going to be in the dollar bin even because it's so old. So unless you're specifically like going through Skyfall and searching for something that says land, and I don't even know how you'd stumble across this one.
Return, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Just
type
look at
of
all
land.
the non-basic lands that have ever been made.
Right, but many times when I do that kind of thing too, I just exclude. I like say just show creatures and enchantments or something because I would assume a land wouldn't do that. So it's probably a card that's really easy to miss as well. Like unless you've seen someone play it or you've seen one in your own bulk or something. It's a relatively obscure card, but I like it a lot in here.
Another one that we all think would be good for this deck would be Drownyard Temple. So it taps for colorless, but you can also pay 3 to bring it back from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So my thoughts on this would be a great sacrifice outlet for Veavictis when you swing with him.
What a perfect card to hit with his trigger.
Right.
Yep.
And then the final one is an Urborg, Tube of Yawgmoth. I'm kind of on the fence with this one. Yeah, it's going to fix your mana, but like we said last week in our utility lands, it also could end up helping your opponents who might also be needing fixing. And also, like, there's only 11 black pips in all of his deck.
So it might not be that huge of a deal there.
I think if you're worried about fixing, I actually would probably just slot in a Chromatic Lantern in this slot.
Honestly, looking at this land base, I'll go through it very quick. It's got all the fetch lands.
Yeah.
All the shock lands. It's got 1 duel. All the other, like, random other duels. So I don't think mana fixing is an issue with this deck. And
with only being 11 black pips, like you said, you definitely could probably get away with not having it. There isn't a Maze of Ith in there, or is there a Glacial Chasm?
There is a Glacial Chasm.
So I mean, it does help with Glacial Chasm tapping, but like
so does Chromatic Lantern.
Right, so does Chromatic Lantern, and Lantern fixes perfectly, unlike Urborg, which just gives you black, and it helps other people, which can burn you. I mean, I've had Urborg burn. I've been saved by someone else's Urborg before. Whereas Chromatic Lantern is just your stuff, and it fixes everything, not just black.
Yep.
Right.
The one land that I really thought about hard that I don't see in a lot of these decks, like I went deep because I've worked on a buddy's Lord Windgrace deck, and he wasn't playing it neither, was Colony Garden.
Is that the one that makes a
0/1 plant token when it enters the battlefield? Now with Veavictis, you sack it off. You have other things in this deck, which we'll talk about later, that return lands from the graveyard. Oh, guess what? You get another plant token.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That used to, one of our friends had a token deck he played for a lot of years, and that was just in there. And I remember the first couple times he cast it, I'm like, that's not worth that 1 token. But, man, it is relevant so often. And if you happen to have double XYZ, you make 2 of them.
Yep.
And, hey, you got Beastmaster Ascension out when I'm going to swing an attack, and study those 2 tokens, or even if it's just 1, that makes a difference.
Yeah, in my opinion, if you're playing a lands deck, you're looking for lands that do more than one thing.
Yes.
And that would
Right.
fall into that category of, it comes into play, creates mana, but it's also bringing something with it.
And that token you're making off that Kalani Garden is a plant token, which, if you can stick an Avenger Zendikar, will grow with all your landfall triggers.
Surprise!
Exactly.
So, should we move on to creatures?
If you would like to move on to
Do you have
creatures.
anything else for lands?
Those are the big ones for me as well.
All right, let's move on to the creatures. So we got 19 creatures in here. Do you guys want me to just rattle them off, or anything you want to talk about in general before I start rattling them off?
No, let's just go through the list quick here.
Yeah.
Okay. We got surprise Avenger of Zendikar,
Yep.
Azusa Lost But Seeking, Courser of Krufix, Deathrite Shaman, Ewit, Green Warden of Marasa, Kozilek Butcher of Truth, Marin of Clan Neltoth, Mina and Den Wildborn, Multani, Yavimaya's Avatar, Nissa Vastwood Seer, Obnixilus the Fallen, Omnath, Locust of Rage, Oracle of Moldaya. We got the Sad Robot, Solemn Simulacrum, for those of you who don't like the word Sad Robot. The Gitrog Monster, Titania, Protector of Argoth, Wayward Swordtooth, and Xenagos, God of Revels.
Xenagos is one that I don't see in a lot of these lists, but for the most part, those are the things you'd expect to see in a Jund Landfall deck.
Yes, everything in here. There's one that I'm surprised I do not see in here.
Which one's that?
Ramnap Excavator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a redundant effect if you happen to have Crucible out, but yeah, it's such a good effect.
Two options
In
of them.
this deck, it's
Yeah.
so important to have that having the backup plan is worth it, I would say.
And worst comes to worst, it is a low CMC curve.
Yes.
Because a lot of these cost a lot of mana. So something
Yes,
low
indeed.
end that's giving you extra value is worth it, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Any things that you think you would like to add to this creature base?
So I'm a fan of the go wide strategy with this type of deck, not the
Okay.
go tall strategy. Mainly because I've seen a lot of Lord Windgrace decks already, and a lot of them are playing the go wide strategy, and
Yes.
it's very effective.
It is.
So my initial inclusions are going to be Bloodghast, because it's
Okay.
it's a 2-drop, so you get something out early, and then if it dies and you play your land, you just bring it back.
Or it gets hit by Veavictis when you use
Right.
your ability. I like that. That's cool. I like that a lot.
Um,
And it still is on theme, but it
Is it-
also ties to the Veavictis as well.
right.
Yeah, I like that.
I said slot in a Lotus Cobra. I mean, that extra mana is really nice, especially if you go fetch land into something. There's 2 extra mana you get every turn.
Yep.
Well, we just talked about Lotus Cobra on the EDH Recast this week because Matt Morgan didn't like it in Windgrace.
He said it was too slow.
I hear what he's saying, but like this is a deck where there's 10 or 12 fetches in there, so that means way more often than not you're probably going to be getting double landfall triggers just from the fetches alone, let alone the extra things that give you multiple landfall triggers. So Lotus Cobra in this deck, the way it's built, very frequently is going to be giving you 2 mana, if not 3, if not 4 or 5.
Agreed.
Yep. And my final inclusion is Nesting Dragon.
I like Nesting Dragon.
The new one from the Lord Windgrace deck, and I'll get into that a little more when we hit artifacts, because artifacts are enchantments, because I have some comments on cards that are in the deck which I don't agree with.
One thing I like with Nesting Dragon too is it kind of gives you that post board wipe thing going on where somebody wraths and you're like, okay, the board's clear. Except for in your case, it's not. You've just had 4 or 5 2/2 dragons pop back up.
It's like the red reform.
Yeah, kind of.
Your eggs die and they become the dragons.
Yeah.
So
And those are also targets you don't mind hitting with a Victus.
right.
Agreed.
The couple of suggestions I had were just mainly about putting things that are a little bit cheaper in here. Scoot Mob cares about lands because once you have 5 or more in play, it starts getting counters every turn, and it's a 1-drop. Now, is it as good as Omnath Locus of Rage? Probably not most of the time, but you do need to have some things you can get out early, or some things you can get out in tandem, because you have that turn sometimes where you want to play that 7-drop. Well, you have 8 mana, you can get that Scoot Mob out too. Whereas if you've got Omnath and that Avenger, you're waiting until the next turn. So it's good to have a few things that are less powerful maybe, but are also cheaper to cast. And I think Dragon Master Outcast also falls into that slot. It's 1 mana and doesn't do anything for a few turns, but like if you have 6 lands out, then he starts making 5/5 dragons every turn.
Yep. I have 3 of them that I think should be added
What
in.
are your 3, Chris?
Wood Elves.
Just to get a land off the body?
It's any forest.
And then you kill the Wood Elves with a Victus.
Yep. especially in this deck because the majority of the CMC is green.
Yeah.
So the ability to go for any forest, it'll help you mana, fix your mana
get your
curve.
shock, get your whatever. Yep.
Tireless Tracker is another one.
Oh yeah.
Whenever you play a land, you get a clue token. Whenever you sack a clue token, he gets a +1/+1 counter.
That fixes that draw problem we talked about earlier. It's also a good Victus target to hit a clue with the Victus.
Now, I'm assuming we're on the same aspect of that. We're not a fan of Omnath because he costs so much.
Yeah, I had some.
He's nice, but he's not nice at the same time.
So no one agreed with me.
I'm not jumping on this train.
But I mentioned this in EDH Recast as well. I've taken Omnath out of a Mina and Den deck because there was so many times I didn't want to play it, or like I'd get to that point, I'd be like, oh, I can play Omnath right now for 7 mana and then do nothing else, or I can play this, and this. And it almost always worked out. I wanted to do the 2 or 3 things versus just playing Omnath. And there was enough times, too, when I did play him, it would use the entire mana for the turn, and I wouldn't have mana available to do a landfall. So I'd have to wait a full turn, and then everyone's gunning for him immediately anyway. Maybe is just bad luck on my part, because I think we've all had the conversation about how Avenger of Zendikar tends to get shot right away, too. But I feel like Omnath really does that as well in this kind of deck.
So my suggestion for a replacement would be Rampaging Baloths.
Yeah.
Because
it does kind of the same thing.
Yeah, a 6/6 for 6 with trample.
Yeah.
So just his initial body is better than Omnath's.
Yep.
Then landfall, you get a 4/4 green beast. Yes, they don't when they die or whatever like Omnath does.
They don't lightning bolt somebody.
But still, if worse comes to worse, you have the 6/6 for 6 with trample.
Being able to put out that on turn with 6 mana versus 7 is a big difference, and it's only 2 green versus 2 green and 2 red.
Yep.
I mean, no one agreed with me, and if you look on EDH Rec for the Lord Windgrace deck, the number 1 new include is Omnath, Locus of Rage.
Really?
But I get why the card is good atop of your deck as its own commander, and I get why he's good too. I just have found he's just too much mana, and he just doesn't do the thing fast enough.
Well, since we're all split on this, why don't we shoot it out to our Twitter listeners and everybody else? Hit us up and see what your personal opinions are on Omnath.
Because I may well be wrong on 2 different shows. I said the same thing on both of them.
Here's my reason for keeping him. He has 2 cards in this deck that make elemental tokens, Titania and Omnath.
Okay.
Yep.
And with some cards I want to put in later, you're just going to win. Like, if you can do it right, you're going to make all these tokens, and you're going to bolt people till they're dead.
Okay.
Especially after how we lost to a Lord Windgrace deck this week.
And, to be fair, we keep mentioning Veavictis' ability. Hitting an Omnath token, getting a bolt on top of that is fine.
That is true.
I don't think he's terrible in the deck. I just, like myself,
I agree. I see your points, and I do understand where you're coming from. I just think he's a finisher. He can easily be a game ender if you play it correctly.
Okay.
The one other creature in here that kind of throws me off guard is Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Now, I know in Gitrog decks, they have a tendency to mill themselves, which is what Kozilek was in there for. Kozilek or Ulamog or whatever to reshuffle their graveyard back in. So I'm not sure if it's in here just as a big beater that nets you 4 cards or if it's actually in there for a purpose.
I would guess it's for the reshuffle mostly. I would have said it was to try to flip it off of Veavictis, but there's no way to manipulate that, so you're just hoping he's on top. You don't get
the cast trigger though off of them, so
I would guess it's for the reshuffle.
Yep. Okay. I definitely think that. I did have a few that I think should get cut.
Okay.
I don't like Marin in this deck. I don't think you have enough. All your stuff is too high costed you're really gonna have to ramp up your experience counters. Yeah. After getting Marin flat out on the field, and since Marin's not the leader,
it's much tougher to get those experience counters and have them matter.
Right, because you don't have a lot of 1-drops or 2-drops like your Wood Elves or your Land War Elves or anything. So sacking your Green Warden of Marasa it feels like a waste of a turn.
Yep. If you're talking Graveyard Recursion, Excavator is going to bring you back things that matter way more often than Marin is.
Right.
And I actually have a card for our next part we're going to talk about that I was going to replace for Marin.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's move to the next part then, which is enchantments.
Woo!
All right. We'll look at enchantments next, and there are 8 of them in the deck. I'll just kind of scan through them here really quick, and then we can talk about it. You've got Dictate of Erebos, Elemental Bond, Grave Pact, Greater Good, Miri's Guile, Squandered Resources, Sylvan Library, and The Mending of Dominaria. So those are all pretty good enchantments, but I feel like they're not quite right for this deck. Does that make sense to you guys?
There are 2 of them in here, teacher, that I don't like.
Same here. They don't feel like they all work together.
Yeah, I feel like they were maybe ones that worked really good in other landfall decks, but maybe don't quite work here.
Right.
The 2 that jump out at me right away were Dictate and Grave Pact, which are great
But
cards.
here's my argument to this one,
what's
because
your
these
argument?
are the 2 that I don't like neither.
Same
Okay.
here.
But I sat and thought about it really hard last night about this, as well as watching Lethal Weapon.
Okay.
Just so you guys know.
Ooh,
Awesome
nice.
movie. If you haven't seen it, youngins, you should watch it. It is rated R, so
I
get
haven't
your
watched it
parents'
for
opinion.
a lot of years.
So, Dictate and Grave Pact, they both read, when a creature of yours dies, everyone else has to sacrifice a creature.
Yep.
So Veavictis forces you to sack a permanent.
Okay.
So you sack a permanent,
And then
everyone does.
It double
and then
triggers.
It has to trigger on them again.
Sure.
Which is why I think they're in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that thought process, and I kind of thought the same thing, but I think Veavictis might be like Plan B. So I don't feel like running 2 cards for Plan B doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because I went scoured through this list looking for a reason why they were in here, like a sack outlet, and the only
Greater
thing I
good.
could find,
And
well,
there's
greater
greater
good
good.
too, yeah.
What would you replace them with?
I have one that I would replace Marin with. These 2 I don't.
I have 2 that I would replace.
What are
these
your
with.
2?
I would replace them with Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar.
To have sack outlets for your elemental tokens.
So here's my thinking. So I'm going wide.
Yep.
You sack an elemental token with Omnath on the field. You bolt someone. You make 2 mana. You have a green open. Now I'm going to scape shift.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Make a bunch more elemental tokens.
Yeah.
True.
Sack them all. Bolt a player to death, or maybe 2 players, depending on how much. Then you play Splendid Reclamation if you still have a green mana open. Bring all your lands back and just keep doing the process. Man, I'm turning into a spike.
You really need to come play 1v1 Commander
Well,
with me.
and there's
The
also
way that your mind's going.
he does have Perilous Forays in the deck, which lets you
Yes.
sacrifice a creature to search for a land with basic land type and put it into play. Well, then if you're generating extra mana, you can sack a token and generate 2 mana to have extra mana for the Perilous Foray, which is then going to sacrifice a token to go get a land, which makes a token. Like the Ashes Altar helps you a lot with that process too. Like you can go infinite with that at that point.
Yeah, that is what I replace those 2 with in my mind. Is like,
And Forays is already in here.
right.
I could see you leaving 1, and probably the one that I would leave would be Dictate. Because I do believe Grave Pact is 3 black.
Grave Pact is triple, Dictate triple, and it's 4 total, whereas Dictate is double black but 5 total.
And
With
it has
flash.
But it has flash.
Yes.
So you can do it in response to somebody doing something or
the Veavictis trigger.
Yeah, the flash makes a big difference, and so does particularly in a 3-color deck, so does it only being double black pips.
Right.
So, Dana, I'll let you talk about what you were going to bring up, and I know which one it is that you didn't really like in here.
The one I didn't like a lot was Miri's Guile. Because number one, you already have Sylvan Library in the deck, and if you have Sylvan Library out, Miri's Guile doesn't do anything. And if you like that, that's not going to happen that often. Like redundancy, which we mentioned before, redundancy can be really, really good. I just don't know if the redundancy, I don't know if it's that good of an effect anyway. The suggestion I was going to make here was Abundance.
Yep.
Abundance lets you basically, when you draw a card, you can name land or non-land, and you just reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal the appropriate one. So number one, Abundance is good in this kind of deck if you need lands for landfall, or if you've got enough lands you don't want lands for some reason. That is really useful on its own. However, since we already mentioned you have Sylvan Library, this came up on our show where we talked about weird EDH interactions, but Sylvan Library and Abundance combo together, and it lets you keep all 3 of those cards without paying any life.
As long as they're what you were looking
Looking
for.
As long as they're what you like,
Yep.
you still have to do the name the card thing, but like then you can keep all 3 and just draw it down until you hit the 3 of the kind you wanted. So I think that is going to be more useful more often than having a backup bad Sylvan Library, which is what Miri's Guile is. Also, Abundance interacts with Life from the Loam, where... Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Oh, yeah. And also Life from the Loam is in his deck, and Abundance interacts with that as well. So you've got some nice synergy there that's already baked into the deck.
So the big thing, and I pound this into people, and if I've said it before, I'm sorry if it's redundant, but Phyrexian Arena is like a go-to need card in decks like this.
In decks like this, yes, having that consistent draw.
Yes.
Because there was on the internet this summer. It came up about Phyrexian Arena because I did a bit on Command Zone talking about how in a really like super tuned deck, many times just drawing 3 cards is more useful than Arena, which takes you 4 turns to get that 3 cards. But this deck isn't built to explode and win in 6 turns.
Nope.
Like this deck, you're planning on winning on turn 12 probably or so. And yeah, you're going to draw Arena on turn 11. It's going to do nothing. But there's so many games it's going to come up on turn 1, 2, 3, or 4. And it's just going to generate you value so much all the way through the game.
And the thing I see in our meta a lot, aside from when I'm playing with you guys, is people just leave Arena alone. They're like, oh, you're taking 1 life. Cool. You're just doing a job for me.
So here's the thing I've noticed about Arena. I remember a point in time a couple of years back when people would remove Arena fairly frequently. But as everyone's gotten to be better deck builders and put more powerful cards in their deck, even if that might not be faster, Arena's become the kind of thing that sometimes you're like, oh man, I want to remove it, but I have 1 removal spell in hand, and I know what's going to happen. Like that scary commander is going to come out next turn, and I got to save it for that. Or I know he just tutored for something, and whatever he tutored for is worse than Phyrexian Arena. So like I've noticed that really with Phyrexian Arena. I think it's not even so much that people just ignore it, is things have gotten to the point where there's much scarier things that you have to worry about than Phyrexian Arena.
But
which is good if you're playing
2
it.
cards a turn, though, is huge advantage. So the enchantment that I was going to bring up in replacement of Marin is called Phyrexian Reclamation.
Oh, yeah.
1 mana black enchantment, 1 colorless, 1 black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. It's something that you can just use when need be. Other times, you just don't use it. Whereas Marin requires so much to go right for you to be able to do what you need to do.
And Phyrexian Reclamation is also another argument to have a few more low CMC creatures.
Yep.
It's so easy to just pay 1 mana to bring back that Scoot Mob and drop it into play for 1 more mana.
Yep.
Like that's so worth it. Pay a few life, get Scoot Mob back, play it. Whereas if you're playing too many 6/7 drops, it becomes really difficult. Like that's going to take your whole turn up for the most part doing that. Whereas the small stuff, you can run it in addition to whatever you're going to play that turn. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Phyrexian Reclamation as well. Was that your deeper dive card?
Nope.
It was not.
Nope.
All right, good. I think that's mostly it for enchantments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the go wide strategy, maybe parallel lives or doubling season.
If you really are going to focus on tokens, that totally makes sense.
But I don't think they're necessary for this build.
This seems to be trying to do a little bit of everything.
Right.
And then we won't stay too long on the Planeswalkers just because he's running Lord Windgrace and the Nissa that you can ult on the second turn she's in play and draw a card when you play a land, both of whom make absolute sense in this deck, and I would leave them both in as well.
Yeah.
Chris, anything there?
I'm just remembering what your notes say about Nissa, her what you called her ult.
Nissa's ult is a sex bomb. I believe it or not, the reason I wrote that is as I was making notes, I was watching Scott Pilgrim.
Oh no!
and that's the name of this band is the Sex Bombs. So that's why I got that idea.
That comes back to Netflix in September.
Yes, it does. Yeah. All right, sorceries, Chris.
Sorceries. So we have 16 of them. So I'll just rattle them off quick. Blasphemous Act, Boundless Realms, Cultivate, Dread Return, From the Ashes, Kodama's Reach, Life from the Loam, Rishkar's Expertise, Scape Shift, Seasons Past, Skyshroud Claim, Splendid Reclamation, Tempt with Discovery, Toxic Deluge, Traverse the Ulvenwald, and Worm Harvest. And immediately, I'm going to say there's one in here that I really hate.
Which one's that?
Tempt with Discovery.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it's a landfall deck, but I hate letting my opponents get stuff.
I would also say that that's a very meta-dependent land because I remember seeing someone, I don't know if it was a pod I was watching in, I think it was the GP Minneapolis, but because I wasn't playing in it, but somebody cast Tempt and everyone went and got a land, like just a basic even.
Yeah.
So it was clearly people that were friends and they were used to just going and grabbing whatever land came out. No one grabbed a Cradle or anything. So like I'm guessing that's why people took the Tempt because the guy who was playing it didn't have anything super scary. If you're playing in that environment where people let you do the Tempt because you're just grabbing basics, then absolutely it's great.
if it's basics I could see, but judging by his land list, I'm assuming his meta is not.
No.
Because
like
I
that.
can't think of the last time in our meta, because I've seen it cast a few times, no one takes it.
Nope.
Every
Unless-
now and then I will, and I'll just be like, I'm going for strip mine. Whatever you go for, I'm blowing up.
if I'm the third person, I sometimes go, okay, they're going to go get Gaia's Cradle, and whatever they get after Gaia's Cradle is going to be less terrible. So I'll go get strip mine, kill their Cradle, and then they'll basically be playing their second best land versus their best land.
Yep.
So yeah, everyone either has to go grab a land destruction land and kill whatever land they play, or just don't take the tempt. I like seeing Blasphemous Act in decks all the time. I think if you're playing red, you should be running Blasphemous Act. I think that's just a board wipe that should be in every red deck. And I like Deluge is always good to see in a deck too. 3 mana, that's nice.
I'm not a fan of Worm Harvest. I think it's expensive for a bunch of 1/1s, and it's conditional about having lands in your graveyard. I think this would be different if Windgrace was at the helm.
Or if you had more Delve cards.
Right.
Or if you were going all in on wide strategy and you're running Parallel Lives and Doubling Season and you just decided you were going to make this a token deck based around landfall. Because there are builds, this is a great card.
Right.
I agree with you. I don't know if this one quite leans enough into it to make the cut. When I was looking at it, I'm like, maybe. I didn't feel it was bad, but I didn't know if I would have necessarily kept it either.
Right. I don't like that there's not like a Nature's Lore in here. A 2 mana, get a forest.
Yeah.
And here's where my deep dive comes in. And it's because we lost to it on Tuesday.
Dive.
Epicenter.
Oh, that was so good in that game.
Epicenter is a 4 and a red for a sorcery. Target player sacrifices a land. But it has this awesome old school keyword called Threshold. And if you do have Threshold, which means you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, all players sacrifice all lands instead.
Now, in a Windgrace deck, it's much easier to get 7 in than maybe it is in this deck. But still,
right.
By the time you want to cast it, you probably are going to have 7 in your graveyard. And if you're ready for that and you've planned around it, you're going to win.
You're going to
win the game.
Yep. And usually we don't condone mass land destruction, but a card like that pretty much is saying, I'm going to win.
And he put it away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It was over. And that was even with myself having a bit of a board state because I had a couple Planeswalkers out and a land tax. So,
oh no!
But he still wrapped it up he killed 2 people except for me, and I held on for maybe 1 turn. I mean, not long enough for it to matter.
Because then he Splendid Wrecked and made a bunch of Titania tokens right. and just went.
Yeah. So it was over. I held on. I was being stubborn because I had just enough board state to be like, maybe I'll top deck the Magical Answer, which I didn't know what it was, but it was, that was a win in that deck, just full stop. The one card I would maybe add, I don't know what I would replace, but I like Chandra's Ignition just in general. But this is the kind of deck where there's a couple of those go tall creatures or where if Multani's out and it's turn 12 and you've got 18 or 20 lands in play, you're probably just going to kill everybody with Chandra's Ignition. In addition to wiping the board and leaving your Multani standing. And if you've got tokens out from Omnath as well, I mean, there's just a lot of situations where, like the worst case scenario, it's a pretty good board wipe for 4 mana. But the best case scenario is you just kill the whole world and walk away.
And I've seen
like
it
a
done.
like a Bond villain. So I like Chandra's Ignition a lot. But yeah, sorcery, the rest of them all make sense. It's ramp spells. It's what you expect to see in this deck. So I like them.
Yep. The biggest thing that I see that was missing, and we brought that up in our brief overview, is lack of card draw.
Yeah.
The other thing is no tutors. Now,
yes.
I completely understand Demonic Tutor is a $40 card.
Jeez.
They just reprinted one called Diabolic Intent. That's like a $5 card.
And you have tokens to sack in this deck.
Yep.
You've got some stuff you can sack.
Something that you can search up your key card that you need to do whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's a good call. Yeah, that's a good replacement in a deck like this. If you don't want to spend $40 for the Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent gets the job done.
Yep. There were some other ones which, like Maelstrom Pulse, I know that's another fairly expensive card for what it does. But no Damnation or Decree of Pain. And both of those aren't very expensive right now.
Yeah.
Which Decree of Pain is just going to net you boatloads.
Yeah.
And you're going to kill all your amount of tokens and people.
Yeah, if we go that way.
How about Instance, Max? What do we got there?
Let's take a look. He is currently running 7 Instants. So we have Abrupt Decay, Crop Rotation, Hero's Downfall, Corrosive Grip, Noxious Revival, Putrefy, and Realms Uncharted. So some of these are okay. I'm not a fan of Abrupt Decay. It's very narrow in what you can do with it.
Yeah, that was my note as well here.
And Hero's Downfall, I think, it's a way to deal with Planeswalkers, I think.
Yes.
And it's cheaper than Vraska's Contempt.
I think Abrupt Decay is probably great in CEDH where everything is so low to the ground, and it's low to the ground as well. This is not a CEDH deck.
Right.
I'd rather just run Beast Within and have
Agreed.
no restrictions on what I can hit, not have to care. I mean, yeah, I can get countered, and Abrupt Decay can't, but being able to deal with any problem, I feel like, is worth that occasional risk.
A lot of times, though, with Beast Within, too, I don't foresee the person countering it unless they absolutely need that thing that you're blowing up, because they're getting a 3/3 out of it.
That makes it a little bit easier to bear.
Yep.
And by the same token, you mentioned Hero's Downfall. Chaos Warp deals with Planeswalkers, too, and hits any target. Yep. We mentioned this before with the Veavictis' flip ability. Occasionally, you'll get burned, but, man, Chaos Warp solves so many problems at instant speed.
Yeah, that was on my list of inclusions, for instance.
The flexibility to hit any target, whether it's with like something like Utter End or Beast Within, I run those cards in the decks that can run them because being able to answer anything and not be restricted is really important to me when I'm playing.
I really like Noxious Revival. I actually didn't even know this card existed.
What?
Yeah.
They play it in Storm and Modern.
Do I play Modern?
Well, you just ask me. I'll let you know.
Oh, okay.
The nice part about Noxious Revival, too, is you can Fate Steal somebody if like you're in a situation, because you can put it on top of someone else's library, too.
Right. I like that scenario. I also like the fact that you can just get something back that you need next turn.
Yeah.
Or you can get something back that you want off of Veavictis when you swing in.
At instant speed, and you don't got to pay mana. You don't have mana free for it.
No, it's 2 life. It's Phyrexian green.
Yeah. I like that card here a lot as well.
Some includes that I think are missing. Chris, you touched on this in the sorceries with tutors. I think a Vampiric Tutor would be a good, yes, it's $40, $50 as well, but...
Deep dive. This is mine.
All right.
And a lot of people have been shying away from this card. Especially in this deck, I do believe a Worldly Tutor would be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
The ability
that's a good
to
call.
search up a creature, because all your stuff requires creatures. Like, you're not running Exploration, Burgeoning, anything like that. The ability to search up the creature, put it on top, before your turn, draw it, and then just start going ham.
Well, I usually wind up, if I'm building like a tutor deck, number one, you assume you're in black, so like I'll just take the black tutors because I'm not restricted. But yeah, like if you don't want to spend the $40 on a Vamp tutor,
yeah, Worldly Tutor is like 15.
Is much cheaper, and for the most part, it's going to get you that card that you want, flip with the Veavictis.
Yep. I ran this in my Ural deck for an explanation why I chose this for my deep dive. Is in my Enchantment Ural deck where I'm suiting Ural up, the only way that it goes real ham is when you have your creatures out that are netting you cards whenever you're playing enchantment.
Right. Yep.
Why not tutor them up to the top of your deck and just go ham?
Yeah.
And have it there.
Yep.
Because you need that engine in place to get
because the commander does not revolve around lands. Yep. So why not search up the Gitrog monster or something like that to just start setting you up where you just get so much advantage that people can't catch up?
No, I agree with that. I like that. Yeah, like I said, the worst case for Worldly Tutor is you draw your best creature next turn.
Yep.
The best case is Veavictis is out and swinging, and I'm going to put that best creature straight into play.
Yep.
So there's not much downside there, and the upside's pretty high.
Right.
I like that.
My other two includes were Heroic Intervention, just a way to protect all your stuff. We've been talking about that a lot recently. And Golgari Charm, just to regenerate that Omnath or Veavictis or Titania, anything that you need to keep alive.
And if someone else is about to go ham with that doubling season, blow that up.
Yep.
There's a bunch of 1/1 tokens that are going to hit you in the face, blow them up.
And all of those are 2 mana or less to play.
Yep.
So our Chaos Warp is 3.
Warp's 3, Beast Within is 3.
Yeah.
But Intervention is 2, Golgari Charm is 2.
Yep, and Vamp is 1. So
Vamp is 1. Yeah, Worldly Tutor's 1. So those are all curve-lowering things as well.
Yep. So the final thing that we didn't really touch on was artifacts. There are only 4 of them. You got Crucible, Elixir of Immortality, Expedition Map, and Lantern of Insight. So basically, my thoughts on artifacts is this is all personal preference for this. Crucible is probably an auto-include an Expedition Map is, but in my opinion, you don't need the signets. You don't really need anything else.
Because you're ramping lands.
Yeah, you have so many lands.
No Soul Ring.
Soul Rings for... yeah.
Wusses.
For basics.
Even though now I got unbanned in 1v1, so I totally play it. So So basically, that was my. I really like it the way it is. I don't think it needs much more to it. If you could do like the Zern Orb, that kind of shenanigans,
Right.
but the deck's not really built to be that heavy into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Lantern makes sense if you're worried about someone's top deck, but I still think I'd rather have Chromatic Lantern.
Yeah.
3-color deck, the fixing is just so useful.
The only artifact that I ever auto-include, even in this deck I probably auto-include, is Commander Sphere. Just for the simple fact of sacking it to draw a card.
Yeah.
Right.
And it gets any color, so
Yep.
it's fixes as well.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Lantern of Insight. I get you want to see everybody else's top card if you're going with the Veavictis route, but the fact that you can only make the person with one person shuffle their library. So if you're in a 4-player pod and 2 of your 3 opponents have equally as scary stuff, who do you pick? Like,
Sure.
That's what it's going to come down to. So I get why it's in here. I also don't think it's quite necessary. I think at this point, Veavictis is plan B. You just roll with the punches and hope you don't get smacked in the face with something.
My one I would remove probably Elixir Immortality, and here's my reasoning. I was just going over this when I was thinking of putting together a Verena deck, because that is a deck where when you swing with zombies, you're going to be milling stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to give a bunch of cards in the graveyard. At some point, I'm going to want to shuffle them all back in and start this over again. But like the more I thought about it, first of all, I was trying to make cuts, and it was getting pretty tight. And then when I got there, I'm like, you know what? If I've gone through that many cards and I haven't won, that's on me. Like if I've chewed through that much of my deck that I need to shuffle it back in and start over again, then I probably just shouldn't be winning, and that's fine. I'm just going to go ham, and if I hit that wall, then I'm going to leave a Dana-shaped hole in the wall, and I'm okay with that. So that was my decision there, and that's definitely probably a personal preference thing, but I'm like, yeah, if I chew through it, I chew through it, and that's just what that is.
Agreed.
So, all right. Final thoughts kind of in wrap-up here. What do you guys think of the deck?
I think it's nifty, I guess. The biggest downfall I see with this deck is that, yes, you're playing Veavictis, but it's just going to turn into playing like every other landfall deck. But you just don't have the advantage of having the commander that gives you extra advantage with it.
Yeah, I'm torn because I like Veavictis.
Oh, I love him.
And I would like...
Or her. I'm not sure if it's him or her.
I think it's him, but I guess I don't know for sure either.
Or check us on
right.
Twitter. You can let us know what you think.
But I do feel like Windgrace would probably do most of the stuff better. And I feel like Veavictis would work in a Veavictis deck better. So I respect the change. I respect the fact that he's doing something different. I like that a lot. But I also feel like the whole time I would feel like, man, I just wish this was Windgrace atop the deck.
And yeah, maybe we'll see that. We'll check in with him in 3 or 4 months and be like, hey, did you just make the switch?
Sure.
Because you could easily just flip them and you'll be fine.
Well, here's my guess what will happen. If we check back in 3 or 4 months, the deck will be different. It will either be Windgrace Landfall or it'll be Veavictis with more Veavictis stuff.
Right.
So I appreciate the dual focus here, but I bet the deck's going to pull him one way or the other, but I guess let's check back and see.
I would love to. I'm really curious about this one.
Any final closing thoughts or business before we check out of here?
I think I'm good.
All right. Chris, Lethal Weapon. Same writer and director who did Iron Man 3.
Oh, really?
His movies almost always take place at Christmas time. That's why Iron Man is at Christmas time, and so is...
Is that why did he do Die Hard too?
He didn't do Die Hard. Shane Black did not write Die Hard. But yeah, he's good. He likes putting Christmas in his stuff. Have you seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr. and
No, I have
Val
not.
Kilmer? Takes place at Christmas too that he wrote. It's an excellent movie. I would recommend.
Yeah.
Okay.
For you and anyone who hasn't seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, it's hilarious.
I'm gonna have to do it.
You're a huge fan of his.
I love Shane Black.
Yeah.
He's like one of my favorite writers in movie dumb. So if you haven't seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang or The Good Guy or The Nice Guys.
The Nice Guys is so good.
With Russell Crowe and
that handsome guy.
the handsome dude.
Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling. The handsome guy. Exactly.
I was going to
Check
say
out-
the Notebook guy, but that would make me way worse.
Yeah. So yes, I recommend that as well. That's a great movie. The language is filthy, so do not watch it with a child in the house, as I almost did one time. And my wife came downstairs like, "What are you? You need to turn this down." So, closing thoughts from our new movie podcast, which we're doing along with our Pokemon podcast and our NBA podcast. And we have a whole list of them we're doing at sub shows at this point. Until next week, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.